Well, Tyler, it appears that summer has almost come to a close. Weather outside is in our area has cooled off. It feels like the beginning of fall. The kids are going back to school. It's
Yeah, it was sub 50 on my drive into work today.
yeah, me too. I was wearing long sleeves at work today. It's a sun shirt, so mostly to keep the sun off me because it's still sunny. Them sneaky days that
Yeah.
when you're very pale, such as myself, you get sunburnt, and by the time you realize it is way too late, and then you're hurting for certain.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, me too. A few times. It's not fun when you start to blister. That hurts a lot. But welcome everyone to Life the Complete Story. I'm Alex. That is Tyler. We are your hosts on this wonderful journey through the tree of life. But first, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, if you would, follow us on all of our socials, and whatever platform you listen to this on, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Music, not yet, because it
Not
was
yet.
giving you
It's giving me the
it's in
issues.
the works. It's giving Tyler issues. Socials, either at Life Complete Story or Life the Complete Story, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube.
All the places.
Said,
And email.
email us if anything you really want to hear about, any like big episode suggestions at lifecompletestory@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you got to do to make the algorithm happy. It makes us happy as well. But with that, we will take us into how we start every episode with a little nature in the news. I actually found this one today. It's a cool one. I was scrolling through that front page of Science Daily, which is kind of a website that compiles a lot of these articles. And just scrolling through that front page, I found a really cool article that was just published yesterday from the University of Basel, I'm not sure how to say it, in Switzerland. So a research team at this university has developed a new molecule that models off of photosynthesis to be able to kind of generate some energy. So it's like a manufactured molecule which has 5 kind of pieces to it that are strung together in like a series where it uses light energy to take. So I'm gonna get a little chemistry on you. They have it set up to work in two set steps, which takes a little bit less. It takes less energy, and it makes it's a little more stable of a reaction. But the light energy goes in and it excites an electron on one of the parts of it on one end, and that electron will leave and then transfer to its opposing part on the other end. So the first piece, it becomes positively charged because it loses the electron, and the other side becomes negatively charged because it gained that electron. And then it does it again in the second step with that next piece in the center. And I think that central piece is just kind of a spacer to prevent like them quite as easily sliding those electrons back to the other side. And this models after photosynthesis because the chlorophyll and the photosystems within photosynthesis use the pretty much the same concept to drive the reaction of photosynthesis using the electron transport chain, as Tyler said, which in this molecule, it's more stable than some of the ones that have been worked on in the past, and it uses a lot less light. And that's why that kind of stepwise reaction makes it very useful, because it requires a lot less energy. And basically the whole point of this is to kind of drive towards being able to conduct artificial photosynthesis, which if they can do it the right way and they're able to use that energy to basically turn it into like regular electrical energy or something of that sort, it'd be way more efficient and way cleaner, greener, whatever you want to call it, than a lot of our sustainable energy resources that we use now. Like even solar panels, it takes a lot of processing to create the actual panels themselves once they're installed, and then over time they wind up having like a net zero as far as carbon emissions are concerned, but they're expensive, and they're not always the most efficient, especially when you get like when they get dirty, they become like almost 25% less efficient, if not more. So this artificial photosynthesis would be an insane step towards like a fully green energy future. So it is, I thought that was really cool. That just the title of the article and it's of itself, science has found a new way to turn sunlight into fuel, really caught my eye. And the way that they're using stuff found in nature and are making something new that resembling that. It's almost like nature's had this figured out for millions of years.
Yes.
Why not go off of that?
Hundreds of millions.
It's working well.
True. Well, Alex, if you have nothing else to add for our nature in the news, I don't have anything either. You pretty much explained it. The only thing I would like to add is that, as Alex said, the current process they're using requires a lot less light, so they're getting it closer to the amount of light that direct sunlight would provide. Prior to this, they needed like a super strong laser to get the light required to process this reaction. And now we're also being able to hold the charges on these two positive, two negative charges longer, so they can be used to make other reactions take place, which is kind of like,
yes,
we have the first puzzle piece to making a longer chain of making biofuels.
Yes.
Or energy in general.
Yeah, if they're able to convert that kind of chemical energy into a usable form of energy, it would be incredible.
All right, Alex, time to move on into our lesson for the day. Today we're talking
yes, sir.
Trichichthyophorbs. So these are kind of like almost a catch-all for the rest of the fish that aren't in next week's group. Most of these are deep sea fish. They include flashlight fish, fang-toothed fish, spiny fins, pinecone fish, redfish, roughy, and slime heads. So a number of these are commercially caught fish, most notably the orange roughy and the redfish. Some members of this order have bioluminescence, which is typically via a different bacteria that grow within different skin pockets or light organs themselves near the eyes. So within this, we have a couple different families. I believe it's narrowed down into 5 families. Yes, that's what our notes have, is 5. Our first family is going to be Anoplogastridae. These are known as the fang-tooths. Alex pulled up an image. They're ugly, as most deep sea fish are. Don't really exhibit much color, kind of scaleless, because the lack of scales kind of helps them with all the pressure of the deep sea. They're worldwide in terms of distribution in both tropical and temperate waters. Although it does sound scary, they're relatively small, reaching no more than 6 inches. And they don't really pose any threat to humans, even with those large teeth. Speaking of those large teeth, their skulls have actually adapted so that on the opposite jaw from their fangs, there is a hollowed out area that partially sits the fang, because the fangs are actually so big that they can't properly close their mouth. So
interesting.
They also have relatively small eyes compared to the body. They're more like almost pinpoints compared to the rest of the body.
Okay.
And they have small, simple, spineless fins, and they have that common diel migration that many of these deep sea fish have, where they're nocturnal feeders. So during the daylight hours, they'll be in the deep sea, typically along the continental slope. And then as it becomes nighttime, they'll kind of climb up the water column and feed on plankton, small invertebrates, whatever they can feed on. That's all I
Nice.
have for this group. Alex, what do we have
Nice.
next?
Our next group, I've got pictures already for today, is the family, Dirometridae. These are also known as the spiny fins. So, as one could guess, their fins have very heavy spines. They're not very big. You can see in the picture I pulled up, the tail of the fish itself is a whopping 1 centimeter. So I'm guessing the whole fish is 5 to 7 centimeters in length. Not real big, but all along the back half of its body, it's the spines look very stout and kind of stiff compared to the some of the other fish we've talked about. As I said, as you can see in the picture, they have deeply compressed bodies, so they're very squished laterally, but they're very wide vertically. Dorsoventrally is the fancy word. And their mouths are nearly vertical, so you can barely see at the front of the picture that I pulled up the kind of opening for the mouth, and it's almost completely up and down. Typically a kind of silvery in color. I think this image is after one's probably sat a little bit
Yeah,
too
it's probably
long.
been processed for
Yeah. And
preservation.
yeah, and some of them can get up to 15 inches in length, so they can get a little bigger. I think this one is just one of the smaller species within this family, or it could be even be more of a juvenile. But it's all for these guys. Not a whole lot. As Tyler says, kind of a catch-all group of deep sea fish, and unfortunately, being deep sea fish, as we've said before, there's not a lot we know about them.
So that'll bring
Good,
us to our
bad, or
next
indifferent.
group. Anomalopidae. These guys are known as the lantern eye fish or the flashlight fish. Something really cool about these guys is, you know how most species have like some type of bioluminescence, and that kind of just either is always on or kicks on for certain occasions.
Mm-hmm.
These guys have lids or pouches that they can kind of like throw up over the bioluminescence, uh, and they use that for communication, hunting, and predator evasion even.
That is super cool.
They are about 6 inches in length and can be found in tropical waters worldwide. They're once again nocturnal, and these guys actually feed on crustaceans along that water column. And that's all for that group. That'll lead us into Monocentridae. And I was with Alex
Yes.
last night, and we were talking about these guys a little bit briefly.
Yes. So these fish are called the pine cone or sometimes the pineapple fish. As you can see from the image I pulled up, they look like a pineapple. Named after they have very large scutes, which is a not quite a scale. It's more of just a hard plate. We'll talk about those more when we get to the reptiles, specifically the turtles and their relatives. But these large scutes cover nearly their entire body, giving them that look of like a pine cone or a pineapple. Their first dorsal fin is comprised of several disconnected spines, but the other fins are typically small and spineless. So that front dorsal fin is the spines are just on their own. There's no tissue connecting them. And then those later ones, they're more just the thin rays. They're not actually spines. They are limited to the tropics and subtropics of the Indo-Pacific. So if you're from the Western Hemisphere, most likely you have not seen one. Potentially like the Western side of the Americas, but I think more when the Indo-Pacific is referenced, is typically like Southeast Asia and the area surrounding that. They have a relatively large subterminal mouth, so that subterminal is just behind the very end of the snout. And they do possess a photophore on each side of the lower jaw that changes colors based on ambient light levels. So that little colorful spot can go will change. I'm guessing probably in brightness as well as the overall color on those light levels. The lighter it gets, it probably gets I would guess more of like this yellow color or
Yeah,
maybe
it'll go
like
from orange to like blue,
uh,
like like a light blue.
yeah, closer to a white
Yeah.
probably. Very, very cool. Well, then that takes us very quickly today to our last family, Trichichthyidae.
Yes. Trichichthyidae. They are known as the roughies or the redfish. They're kind of small, long-lived deep-sea fish. We've kind of learned throughout our journey through fish that a lot of these deeper dwelling individuals have much longer lifespans because they are able to kind of slow their metabolism down since there's not as much food readily available. They slow their metabolism down, which kind of increases their lifespan since they're not using their bodies as much.
Yes.
These guys are also known as slime heads, and there's about 50 species in 8 different genera. They get that name slime head off of the network of mucus canals that kind of run throughout much of their head. They have spinous, rounded fins. It's kind of hard to make out in Alex's image because this Ruffy's kind of hiding in a cave. And
Let
some
me
species are reported to have some bioluminescence. That's a case by case. Different species, different levels of bioluminescence.
see. It's kind of hard to see in this image also.
You can see the roundedness of the fin, and you can
Yeah.
kind of see the hard spines coming out of it.
Yeah, just a little bit right here. These are the spines sticking above the fleshy part of the dorsal fin.
But that's going to conclude our lesson. We kind of went rapid fire through this, but that's okay. It'll be kind of a smaller episode to prep you guys for next week when we
Yes.
do a super episode on Pecamorpha. But we're not done yet.
Yes,
We
we're
have
not done quite yet. Don't get too excited.
our usual suspects. Alex, what do we got in our most wanted for the day?
Our most wanted for today, I totally flipped the script on what we've been looking at here lately. I went back to the hexapods and I pulled out today the gypsy moth. So
I
the
smashed one of these the other day. Well, a larva, but
the gypsy moth, or Lymantria dispar, are a moth species that is typically native through England, parts of continental Europe, kind of that southeastern part of England, found a lot throughout like London, areas like that. The reason why they are an invasive species, especially in the United States, has to do with their feeding habits. So they feed on a lot of broad-leaved tree and shrub species, and they show a preference to trees in the oak and poplar genus. So the oak genus being Quercus, and then the poplars being of the, I believe Populus is supposed to be the genus, not the species.
I'd assume.
But especially in areas that are forested areas where basically it is tall overstory trees. These trees typically are some of the largest, most well foliated trees within those regions. In more open areas, gardeny areas, they will feed on pretty much any small tree or shrub, even including ornamental conifers and hedges, such as hedges of beech, which are a species within the Fagus genus. And the reason that's a problem is because, especially when densities of the caterpillars, so the larvae of the gypsy moth, become incredibly dense, they're able to defoliate, which means they eat all the leaves off of the trees, especially smaller trees that don't have a lot of foliage to begin with. And even they can do some significant damage to even large trees, where if the populations are dense enough. And there are some areas where over a couple years, typically the plant will recover, especially if it is a healthy, larger tree. It is typically able to recover, especially if they got to it later in the season. Earlier in the season, it tends to be a little more difficult. That will have more effect on the vigor of the plant. And then as well, repeated infestations over multiple years will significantly impact the long-term health of the tree, and in a lot of cases lead to the tree dying, which is why in areas such as the United States, where it really doesn't have any natural predators, it is able to have those years of repeated infestation that can I've seen areas where they have wiped out stands of 100-year-old like mature oak trees, and like over multiple acres of land, and it's scary with the kind of work they can do. Fortunately, they do not the caterpillars themselves really don't have any adverse effect on human health. Even though they are very hairy caterpillars, they don't have like any sort of like irritant or something like some like the oak processionary moth, I think is another somewhat similar looking moth that you could find on oak trees. Best to just not touch it, just squish it. Um, the eggs are typically laid on the bark. They look almost like start as like a kind of mossy color, and then becomes more of like a yellowish brown, almost looks like sludge kind of look to it. And it's kind of fuzzy looking. In the woods, they're found on the crevices of bark. In like more urban situations, that you can see them on walls, fences, like sides of houses, especially, or like a shed, especially if it has wood siding. But I think that I'm trying to see. Here we go. Typically, caterpillars mature by June, which is why another reason there's such a problem, because they will wipe out those fresh, newly developed leaves before they have a chance to really get the energy back into the trees themselves. So I do not see anything as it is right now. What can be done for these? I believe this is a species that you may be able to treat the actual trees for. So typically like a bark injection on the tree of a insecticide that doesn't harm the tree, but as it goes through the tree and the moths eat that's in the plant tissue, it can kill the invasive moths. Don't know for sure.
Anything else, Alex?
That is all I've got for this.
I kind of
today.
mixed these guys up with like the tent worms, the tent caterpillars.
Yeah.
They look very similar, like their larval stages, and even as adults, they kind of have like that same like brownish, papery
Yeah.
color, and they also have like very similar wing structures. But that'll take us into my section, the amazing species. I also kind of went a little bit off script. There's no endangered ichthyforms, so I threw it back, not as far back, but back to the angel shark, which is Squatina squatina. So angel sharks are kind of like a hybrid almost of a shark and a stingray. They don't have the stingray like a stingray, but they have that flat body plan, and they live along sandy shore areas. They live pretty close to the coastline. The angel shark is indigenous to the Mediterranean, as well as the coasts of England. They used to live all the way in the North Sea on the opposite coast towards Scandinavia. That's what
Yeah.
it's called. And they go as far south as the coast of Morocco, it looks like.
Yes. Not sure exactly what island chain that is. The hard part with this map is there's a lot of like areas I think they've spotted them.
They're not sure if they're still there, or
I think those are the ones they know that they're there because they found them, but there's a lot of area where they are not sure if they're there or not, like along the coast of France and Spain.
where it makes sense to have them because if they're
Yes.
found more in the Mediterranean.
Yes. And then that kind of eastern coast of the United Kingdom to like Norway, the coast of Norway and Sweden, they think they may be extinct in their areas, but they're not certain. I think it's just for all the searching they've done, they haven't really found them. And I think the other areas they just haven't looked hard enough, or they haven't really studied to know for sure.
So this assessment took place in 2017 and was published in 2019. We've kind of been on a rocky road with these guys. They started out as vulnerable in 2000, reassessed in 2006, all the way to critically endangered, and they've kind of stuck there since then. Yep. I'm trying to figure out where it says. Okay, yeah. Has a decline in area of occupancy. And it says that biomass in various parts of the range of occurrence over extended periods dating back to the early 20th century show declines of 90% with no evidence of recovery. But it's suspected that decline is of at least 80% because the species in itself, prior to it being critically endangered, was still not a very common species, and it is still decreasing. There is still a continuing decline of mature individuals. There's no range-wide populations like we kinda said when we're talking about the map. A lot of it is scattered, and there's kinda like gray marks on where it could be, but we're not sure. But it was considered common, uh, during the 19th and early 20th.
I'm sure a lot of the rise of more heavy commercial fishing would be something that really
Yeah,
impacted them.
they're, really susceptible to bycatch as they are demersal species. So any type of, like, trawl net that just, you know, drags along the bottom of the ocean, destined to pull these things up as bycatch. And over these past 50 years, the trawling effort has kind of increased exponentially. Uh, Although it was also kind of recreational fishing up until I assume it was listed on the IUCN Red List.
Yeah.
Lots of degradation of coastal areas due to, human populations, a lot of coastal cities on the up and up, as well as tourism. And then just it says a low rate of exchange. So it'd be like angel shark going from one subpopulation to another subpopulation and getting that kind of mix of genetic data kind of causes a bottleneck, which we'll get to in a little bit, shrinking the gene pool and causing a lot of genetic issues later down the line.
Yes.
Notably, there's not really any invasive species.
Yeah, surprisingly, in that part of the world, there's not a lot of invasive fish. I don't know if it just has to do with the cold water up in that kind of northern Europe. 'Kay, the Mediterranean is warm. I mean, it's warmer because it gets a lot of the Gulf current that comes off of the United States and crosses the Atlantic. But I believe once it starts to get up towards the UK and definitely to Scandinavia, it's then cooled by the Arctic waters, which that may be a good ecology encyclopedia
Yeah.
topic. It'd be ocean currents, but that is
And
not today's.
up until about the mid 20th century, these guys were used as a food source. The meat was considered light and easily digestible, and the skin was known as shagreen, and it was used for polishing of wood and ivory, as well as sharks have that fatty oily liver, and then it was also used as a fish meal. That's all I have for today's amazing species, Alex. Let's throw it into our ecology encyclopedia.
Yes, sir. So our ecology encyclopedia today, we're going to talk about something we've referenced before but haven't really covered is genetic drift. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the founder effect and the genetic bottleneck effect, which are they're two sides of the same coin, and it'll make more sense in a second. So I'll start with the genetic bottleneck, which is when if you're looking for a picture, Tyler, it's easier to visualize. So what happens is you'll have a population of a species, and within that population, say you have red, green, and blue. Well, then something comes along that wipes out most of the green, let's say. So you're primarily red and blue, whether it's some sort of disease that the green, oh, look at that.
Potentially, maybe.
Yeah. Like a disease, some sort of predator that is like a new predator that is able to see certain colors more visible to that predator. Just a sudden shift in preferred mating partners. And what this bottleneck does is it takes that wider gene pool and, as the name suggests, bottlenecks it or narrows it down to just a more specific set of genes. And in the picture Tyler's pulled up, you start with equal distributions of the 5 different colors. And then you say you have an initial bottleneck where It wiped out most of the yellow species per se, or the yellow individuals in the population,
And the
and then
pink as well.
yeah, and a lot of the pink as well. But then you had an uptick in a different type. But then as that continues, now that you lost in the picture he's pulled up in that 10th generation per se, now you've completely lost the yellow and the pink. So something in the bottleneck has limited that specific gene or gene type so much that it is now gone. And this is
As for a real world example that I like to use is the moths from
yes,
the Industrial
the
Revolution,
what are the
the
pepper moths or
salt and pepper moths, whatever you want to
yeah,
call them. So I'll explain it real quick. In the early 20th century, before like the Industrial Revolution took place, there was a group of moths, and they were lighter in color, um, and they blended in pretty nicely with the trees around.
great picture for this. And it actually ties right into the genetic.
So they'd be lighter and they'd blend in more in the trees, but exactly perfect. You could pick out the black ones pretty well. Um, and then post industrial revolution, the trees around get darker because there's more soot and pollutants in the air. The darker moths actually start to blend in better. So predators are eating more of the lighter colored moths. And obviously there's more than just black and white moths. There's a gradient involved in this, but
Yeah.
for this purpose, it's black and white.
Yeah, they're like lighter versus darker. Initially the lighter moths were selected, but as the soot and the like the ash and everything that collected on the tree bark became more so even lighter colored trees, like say like a white birch or like a paper birch that has a very almost white colored bark, now becomes very sooty, and then the black moths or the darker colored moths are much more easily hidden, but the lighter color moths stick out more. And that is just one example of like what the genetic bottleneck does to, and this happens a lot. And this is when we talk about like with declining, like our amazing species with their population declines. This is something that a lot of scientists really look at because it can bottleneck to a point like the image that Tyler first shared, to where that's certain, even to the point where the whole species now does not have enough, say, genetic differentiation throughout the population
A
to
big one
where,
for that is cheetahs.
yes,
The cheetah gene pool is so destroyed because
yes,
it's gone through like 30 different bottlenecks.
yeah, to the point where even the cheetahs that survive tend to have a lot of problems. They do not live very long. And it can get it to the point where that species goes extinct because you now limit the gene pool so much that even if there are enough surviving individuals, they don't have enough genetic difference to produce viable offspring.
Right. And then there's another thing that occurs similar to bottleneck effect. That's the founder effect,
Yes.
which is a different type of bottlenecks. The population bottleneck is just a general X event occurs in the timeline that causes X traits to be more relevant. Well, the founder effect is you have your original population and yeah, the ancestral population, and a small population moves to a new area. In this case, it's these butterflies, where two of the brown butterflies and one of the orange butterflies leaves. So you're going to have primarily brown and orange butterflies in the new population and not a single white butterfly.
Yeah. And this is something you see a lot with things like this, like birds, butterflies, like flying animals, because say, as I think we talked about it last week with the natural disasters, where something like that can push a population somewhere that they're unfamiliar with, especially like a migratory population. It can push it to a new area and then kind of founds that new population. But other things can cause that as well, such as the creation of some sort of new large, like geological feature, like a movement of a river.
A continental land bridge that spans from Asia to North America.
Yeah. Um, something of that sort that moves the population or fragments the population to a point where they eventually actually become different populations and to the point where it could become a different species entirely if given enough time.
There's been cases of that in the Grand Canyon. There's a ground
Yes.
squirrel species on the south and the north side of the Grand Canyon where not quite yet, but they're getting to the point where they will be recognized as two separate species
Yeah.
with probably within, I wouldn't say our lifetime, but within a couple generations of us.
Yeah. Yeah. The initially, like when the Grand Canyon was smaller, they were able to cross over and the two populations were able to interbreed. But over time, as that area has become wider and larger, it's difficult for them to cross over. And now they are actually becoming separate species. But that is all I have on that. Just a little quick little genetics lesson, something that we've talked about some, especially with the genetic bottleneck aspect. Just figured it'd be good to cover.
That's I thought it was perfect. I thought we did a really good job of kind of explaining the basics of it. Some of these topics that we cover in ecology encyclopedias, we can kind of throw together into one longer video eventually,
Yeah,
uh,
maybe.
and kind of go a deeper dive into them. But for now, you'll get your little overviews.
Yes.
But I've been Tyler. That's been Alex. We've been Life the Complete Story with another branch on the tree of life. As Alex said at the beginning of the show, make sure to follow us on our socials, wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. We are available at Life the Complete Story. On you, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do there. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Life Complete Story. Send us an email at lifecompletestory@gmail.com and like us on Facebook at Life the Complete Story for extra news articles. Alex, what do we always say?
As we always say at the end of every episode, keep on learning, learn something new. You'll never know what you find interesting. But again, I've been Alex, that has been Tyler, and thank you for joining us on another episode of Life the Complete Story. We will see you next week for a big episode. We're going to wrap up the fish with the perciforms, which is pretty much all of the fish we haven't talked about, all of the ray fin fish we haven't talked about to this point. It's going to be quite a doozy.
Oh, yeah. See you next time.